Good afternoon, Mary.
Hi there.
Hi, Chris West here with Catholic Relief Services. We'll be getting started shortly.
Oh, so I'm first, huh?
Yeah, you're actually a little bit early. We're supposed to start at 12:45, so
Oh,
I'm glad you're here.
oh,
So good time to grab a break if you need a break.
okay. Well, I'll be back in a few minutes then.
Okay, no
Thank
worries.
you.
Good afternoon, Liam. How are you? We'll be getting started here shortly, folks. Schedule start at 12:45. So if anyone needs to grab a drink or stretch, step away from the computer for a moment, it would be a good time to do that. Hi, Kathy. Welcome. We're going to be getting started here in about 3 minutes. Supposed to start at 12:45. So glad you were able to join us.
Glad to be here.
Well, it is showing 12:45 on my clock. I am a firm believer in starting on time and ending on time, if not early. I find that respecting people's time is always important. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Chris West. I'm with Catholic Relief Services, and this is Ending Global Poverty Through Advocacy. I'd like to start by opening us in prayer. This is a prayer for global solidarity. O Creator, our world is large, and yet the global community is so fragile. We glimpse the need of our sisters and brothers, and those needs are great. We want to turn away, but you call us back. We want simple solutions, but you want us to help solve the complex problems. Through your church, you call us to listen, to learn, to reflect, and to act. Give us a deep sense of our place in this web of creation. Give us the wisdom of mind and the generosity of heart to seek your will in the world today. Inspire us to live in solidarity with impoverished countries of the world.
Oh, you're snoring.
And so that all children of God might live in dignity and peace. Amen.
Amen.
Well, welcome, folks. My name is Chris West. I'm with Catholic Relief Services, and I am a community engagement manager here in the Northeast Mid-Atlantic part of our country. I'm going to be spending a bit of time talking about who CRS is and what we're doing around the world, but then also dive into what we're doing here in the United States, and in particular, how CRS is trying to engage Catholics and Catholic communities here in the United States to advocate on behalf of our sisters and brothers around the world. But before I do, I just want to get a sense from folks who are in the room of maybe your name, parish, and because I don't have all the parishes memorized, where that parish might be located, and maybe a word about what intrigued you about the workshop. Maybe, you know, how to advocate for global solidarity to change the world. It's a big thing to do. So why'd you decide to spend time with me today? Mary, do you mind jumping in first?
Sure. I belong to St. Vincent's Parish, downtown Baltimore.
Okay.
And I'm well acquainted with CRS in one way because I have so many friends who have worked there. Mary Hannigan and Mark Palmer and Susan, Jerry Sokola. So I love all those people, but I would like to know more about CRS.
Okay, excellent. Happy to share some of that with you today. Kathy, do you want to go next?
So I'm Kathy Gross, and I go to St. John the Evangelist in Columbia, where we have a committee called Embracing Global Solidarity, of which I am a part. And we are very interested in especially in the advocacy piece. We've been working on sustainable, I just forgot the IMF.
The Sustainable Development Goals?
No, the what they're currently discussing for aid to develop the developing world using an IMF fund vehicle, the SDRs, which I was getting the wrong letters for, but yes.
Okay, well, excellent. And that St. John's is down in Columbia, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And Marie, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Marie Sakowitz with Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Ellicott City, Maryland. I work with our SALT ministry, which is outreach in Baltimore to some of the other charities. Right now, we've been doing bag lunches since the pandemic started, but before that, we would serve down by Falls Way and Broadway every weekend to those groups, just bringing them a hot meal and compassion and love each weekend. So I was interested in this topic.
Oh, well, great. We're glad you're here. Pauline, hi, we're doing introductions. If you wouldn't mind sharing just your parish and where that parish is located, and what was intrigued you about this workshop?
Well, I am from St. John the Evangelist in Frederick, Maryland. And what interests me is because I come from a country that, is also struggling in poverty. And actually, I got interested in this too because, from the U.S. Bishop's Catholic, Catholic social ministry gathering.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to hear another, perspective.
Excellent, thanks. So can I ask your country of origin?
Philippines.
In the I was actually just talking to somebody about the Philippines. And years and years and years ago, I happened to live there.
Oh,
So, yeah, I was in Subic, and my
Oh,
little
yes.
brother was born there. So my
Oh,
father
wow.
was in the Navy.
Wow. Okay.
And one of my favorite things I will confess is my mom still cooks lumpia for us every now
Oh,
and
wow.
then.
Yes.
So that's great. Mary Beth, a good friend and colleague who I know well. Mary Beth, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll be really quick. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mary Beth Edu, and I'm here with my 5-month-old son, Gabriel. And I am thrilled to see all of you here. I used to work very closely with the social ministry convocation and with Archdiocese of Baltimore. I'm in a different role now at CRS, but I continue to work there in a new area now. So it's great to be with you. I'm a parishioner at St. Matthew Parish, and I'm excited to kind of be in and out probably of this session, depending on how Gabriel does. So it's great to see all of you.
Absolutely fine, and beautiful, beautiful boy. So we're glad you could join us. So I'm going to just dive in. I see that we've got a couple other people either popping in or popping out. We'll have a chance to dialogue a little bit later as we get going. But I just wanted to share, many people know CRS from the Catholic Relief Services Rice Bowl. That's how a lot of people first discover CRS. And that, of course, is a Lenten giving activity that people can do in their parishes and with their families. And if I don't have to remind you, it is Lent. And if you don't have your rice bowl, feel free to contact me and I can get you a rice bowl later. But the reality is that those funds that people contribute help CRS's work around the world. CRS is the official international humanitarian agency of the Catholic community of the United States. And what that means is that by being a humanitarian agency, it simply means that our work is focused on serving the human needs of the people in the countries in which we work. And so where do we work? We are in over 100 countries. I think it's at last count 114 countries, and are annually serving between 130 and 135 million people. So that I like to think about this is that CRS is the way our parishes here in the United States can minister around the world globally. By participating with CRS and standing in solidarity, we are standing in solidarity with our sisters and brothers. And to be honest, we don't do this work alone. Our work is done in partnership with the local community and especially in partnership with the local church organizations. That's because we believe that the people closest to the problems have the greatest insight into how to solve those problems. So around the world, CRS works as I said, in 114 countries. The majority of our staff, of our 5,000 staff, are indigenous to the countries in which they work. So in the Philippines, most of our staff are Filipino. In Nigeria, they're Nigerian. And so you can find CRS on the ground in Africa, to Asia. We're working in the Middle East, and in Central and South America, right? And we're responding to crises by doing emergency relief work when there are earthquakes, Certainly we're responding, and often on the ground right when they hit, or maybe it's a flood or a cyclone that's happening. CRS is on the ground. Unfortunately, we're seeing more droughts with the increasing changes in climate. And most unfortunate, some of our response is actually to man-made conflict, like wars or persecution of peoples. And it leads to our work with refugees. We actually originally started back in just after World War II, serving refugees from Europe from the Second World War. And today, we continue to work with refugees around the world. And we respond with things like food aid, using gifts from the United States people, working with USAID to deliver food around the world in emergency situations, to working in clean water and sanitation. We work in the healthcare section or the education section sector, helping people make sure that education is provided, especially in refugee centers and people who are on the move. We work in healthcare strengthening. Had some major interventions recently with the Ebola crisis in West Africa. And we actually even work in agriculture. That's a big sector for CRS, ensuring that farmers around the world can both grow better crops, more diversified crops, drought-resistant crops, and also looking at supply chains. How do we help connect those small-scale farmers to supply chains so that they can actually have their products move to market well? Just a very brief, weird story. I was at a CRS gathering of staff in Istanbul, Turkey, working with our entire teams from across the Middle East. And one of the experts there that was presenting on sheep gestation periods, right? So we've got experts who are working with like the gestation period of sheep to educate people on the ground about the best time to be feeding and intervening with the pregnancies of sheep, because we want those small scale farmers to do that. When I started at CRS, I never suspected I would meet an expert on sheep gestation, but there we go. Wherever we work, we do it on the basis of people's need, not creed, not their country of origin. As a Catholic organization, we believe that all people in the world have inherent dignity, and it's our duty to uphold that dignity, no matter who they are or where they're from or what they believe. It's often said that we help people based on who we are, not who they are, right? We help because we're Catholic. So real quick, I want to share a short video with you called Faith Has No Bounds that talks a little bit about our work so that you can get a sense of that.
Catholic Relief Services answers the call of our faith to go as one human family across borders, natural and man-made. Often the first to reach the farthest corners of the globe, we serve over 130 million of the world's most vulnerable people. Alongside our brothers and sisters, we lift up the dignity of every single person. Based on need, not creed, together we combat poverty, hunger, disease, social injustice, violence, saving lives, alleviating suffering, and realizing the God-given potential of every human being, not because they're Catholic, but because we are. We want to be a catalyst for positive change in the world. With partners at every level of government, public sector and private, we share values and accomplish more than any organization can alone. Seeing eye to eye, working shoulder to shoulder, our global footprint helps us recognize the potential of every human being. But changing the world means breaking away from business as usual, testing new approaches to humanitarian and development outcomes, creating a movement of millions of Catholics on every continent for greater impact than ever before. Bold yet humble, we work until all people know peace and justice. We stand ready to thrive and lead. Are you ready to go with us? To lead with us? Together, we can take the world further than ever before. There is no limit.
So I'm just going to pause there real quick and see if that brief introduction of CRS brings up any questions that to the top of your mind. If you're chatting, Mary, I couldn't hear you.
Now you can, right?
Yes, I can.
You're in 114 countries. All the money comes from United States churches?
Actually, no, that's a great question. So about 2/3 of our budget actually comes from the US federal government. Like other big international organizations, we apply to USAID and the State Department for grants for food distribution. And so in one of the video, the shots there, you saw food distribution and it had big bags of grain that said USAID on it. We actually get government food and we're distributing that around the world in compliance with the government grants, things like that. But about 1/3 of our money comes from Catholic communities here in the United States. And that allows us to work outside of those government restrictions. So for example, this is a story that I got to witness firsthand. We were in the highlands of Ethiopia. I was on a delegation where we were taking some diocesan directors from around the country to see CRS's work as they're promoting CRS's work. We're occasionally able to do that. And this was pre-COVID, obviously. In the particular area that we were working in, there had been internal conflict, political conflict that had driven people away from their villages and their communities. Through our peace building work, that had been resolved and people were moving back home. And so the US government was funding some shelter programs. So we were able to rebuild homes for people and with local communities. And they were also offering some livelihood programs. So we had some money to do that, where we were helping people buy sheep and cows and other things so that they could reinvest in their community and get started. Well, while we were meeting in the village elders told our country representative, this is great that we're doing this, but one of the needs we have is that we've got some sick people and we don't know what's happening, or we can't get anybody up here. And so, without making promises in the spot, we said that we would do what we could. We got in our vehicles, and as we're moving on to the next site, I was talking with our country representative, and we're trying to figure out how do we get healthcare interventions. Because CRS has the flexible funding from Catholics around the United States, we were able to contact one of our partners on the ground there in Ethiopia, some Franciscan sisters who ran a hospital that was about 40 miles away from the village, and said, here's the situation, we need to get some healthcare up there, but we don't have a doctor on our staff. Could you get up there? And they said, well, we don't have the money for transportation or the medicine, but if you can get those things for us, if you can get us there and pay for the medicine, we can be there tomorrow. And the next day, we had a doctor in that village who was able to treat a number of adults with dealing with some dysentery and some other issues, as well as a number of children who were dehydrated. And that flexible funding that comes from the Catholic community allows us to do that. So again, a large percentage comes from the US government, but a significant portion that allows us to do that gives us some flexibility. And as Mary Beth has said, that the money that we get, she put in the chat, including funds from the US government, everything we do is done under upholding Catholic moral and social teaching. So if the government's, for example, offering us some programming on HIV/AIDS and they insist on us using things that go against church teaching, we won't take that grant. We just will not do that. And so everything we do stands for that. As a matter of fact, everything that we do is guided by Catholic social teaching. CRS's guiding principles are based on Catholic social teaching and the work that we do. And at CR and so that what does that mean? So for example, when we're working in countries that are predominantly, say, Muslim, many of our staff there are Muslim. Every one of CRS's staff are oriented to and are trained on Catholic social teaching, what that means, what our guiding principles are. And one of the beauties, honestly, I think about Catholic social teaching is it's universal. I mean, with the primary, the three main religions around the world, the dignity of every human person is upheld in all those religions. And so there's nothing in Catholic social teaching that is inherently against, say, different faiths. And so people who, my Muslim colleagues at CRS, love Catholic social teaching and promote and strive to uphold that. So as we do that, though, one of the things that we start looking at is taking in all aspects of a person's life into consideration, because humans are complex and our needs are interrelated. So, for example, if we're able to do some food for work programs and be able to give people jobs, then those people are much more likely to have an income that provides food for their family. And by providing food for their family, your kids are able to eat. And if they're able to eat, they're able to better concentrate in school and prepare for their future. So CRS approaches our work through the lens of integral human development, that humans are complex and that the needs we have are complex. So we're not going to just come in and provide clean water without educating people about sanitation, without providing them the means for caring for those wells that we build, things like that. And in addition to the 114 countries around the world, we also work here in the United States in thousands of Catholic communities and parishes, schools, universities, even seminaries, inviting people to join in the ministry of standing together in solidarity with our sisters and brothers around the world. I do have another video, but I also want to pause and see if there are other questions at this point. And was I able to answer that question, Mary? Yeah, I think one of the things that I believe is that the generosity of people matters. We also need governments to help us with the really big problems, because the church alone can't fund everything. So in partnership, we're able to do it. I would also note that we're able to get grants from other countries as well. We've occasionally gotten grants from Caritas Germany or the State Department, the British Embassy partnered with us in Ethiopia on some programs that we were working on, which is a really interesting and fun way to do it. This next video is called Create a Better World, and I just want to share this. It's kind of a call to action for people here in the United States of how CRS is working around the world.
It's not about imagining a better world. It's about creating one. We don't just build shelters. We work with the world's poorest communities to create the homes and new beginnings they see for themselves. We're not here to change for the sake of changing things. We're here to walk with our brothers and sisters towards their vision for a better future. We're inspired by faith and motivated by the men and women we serve. The deeper the problem, the more we immerse ourselves. By working alongside people in communities, we hear their voices, we feel their passions. By building initiatives with church and local partners, we uncover insights into the change they want to see. No matter what it takes, at Catholic Relief Services, we are committed to creating the blueprints for sustainable, resilient futures. Over time, these changes transform not only communities, but also the way we work towards change going forward. It's not just a house, or a road, or a well that we're building. It's how homes lead to neighborhoods, wells lead to farms, farms lead to schools, schools lead to equality, innovation, and a better quality of life. These are the building blocks for a better world. We believe that every person in every corner of the world has something remarkable to offer. We believe that all people are created with dignity, that we all deserve a voice, a chance, a future, and that everything we do is an opportunity to be a catalyst for change, so that we leave behind resilient communities that continue to grow and thrive long after we are gone. It's not about imagining a better world, it's about creating one. At CRS, that's what we do.
So I don't know if you caught that image in there of the people with the puppets, but this is one of the, again, really interesting things. We're partnering with Jim Henson's workshops to work actually in trauma situations with kids in Syria and other places who have experienced violence, and using puppets to help do trauma intervention counseling. And it's just, I think, another way of thinking, like, how are we able to reach people in ways that matter, that matter to them, that are safe, that are respectful of their dignity. So personally, I get really thrilled with the new innovative work that CRS is doing at times around the world in doing that. It's probably no surprise to you that CRS is, as I said, guided by Catholic social teaching and principles, that we use this model of the 2 feet of love in action. I'm sure this is familiar to anyone who's hung around social ministry convocations. Obviously, we step with the charitable works when we aid others globally to support short-term needs and long-term needs, such as food aid. When there is a famine, people need food immediately. We can't wait for justice. We have to intervene then. And we're doing that around the world through our emergency relief work. But we also step with the foot of social justice overseas when we're looking at long-term solutions, empowering communities, having people bring voices. So for example, we believe that the education of young girls is really critical to creating a better and more sustainable world, more equitable world. And then here in the United States, advocacy is one of the most effective ways that we can work for justice by creating systemic changes that eases human suffering, right? So when there are unjust policies or systems and we can change that because of our efforts, millions of people win. And we also believe that the CRS, the work that we do with program participants around the world, made possible by charitable contributions, is truly transformational. Those projects, both large and small, were able to help work with communities to become more resilient and to thrive. Although I'll be honest with y'all, the current world is facing some challenges, right? Our human family is facing some really big problems now, and they're very complex. There are more people on the move today than ever before. Because of conflict, because of natural disasters, because of climate change. We're seeing changing patterns in the way people are able to live and lead dignified lives. Truth be told, we would love for every human being to live a dignified life right where they are so that they don't feel compelled to have to move. But we know that the conditions of the world are broken and that sometimes people do have to move. And the question is how do we do that? How do we do that well? The enormity and complexity of the issues can sometimes be overwhelming and we feel powerless. But at CRS, we're rising to meet the challenge in addressing those issues. And part of that is calling on the Catholic community here in the United States to join us in that work. And there are concrete solutions to address some of those most pressing issues. That's why currently we have 2 major campaigns: Lead the Way on Migration and Lead the Way on Hunger. And in so many ways, as I talked about the integral human development, those are connected. People are migrating oftentimes because they're hungry, that one leads to the other, or during their migration, they are hungry. We're inviting people to join a movement here because we believe that it is possible to prevent and end hunger, and to ensure that all people can exercise their right to lead a dignified lives where they are. These campaigns have actually kicked off, and we are doing good work. We're inviting Catholics around the country to join us in that. In fact, we've got a campaign, the Lead the Way campaign. I'd like to share that video with you right now. Maybe if my screen goes down.
That you can make a difference. Believe that the world needs you. Believe that your faith needs you. Believe that you, as a follower of Christ, have the power to connect, to change, to lead. Together, we are building a movement of Catholics through and with the church, a movement that children and their families are depending on this very minute, a movement that is growing 1 or 5 or 100 people who share a vision of love and service into millions. For him, for her, for them, for you. Answer God's call. Go take the first step. Do what it takes to address the root causes of poverty, social injustice, violence, and hunger. Love your brothers and sisters by upholding human dignity for each person. And let's not stop until all of God's children can take their futures into their own hands and walk a path to peace and prosperity. Lead the way. Believing is serving.
So here in the States, obviously we can't have people, fly to Ethiopia on the weekend to volunteer there. That's just not going to happen, not practical. But there are ways that people can get engaged here in the United States that can truly make a difference. And our campaigns are one way to do that. And so you can sign up online at our Lead the Way campaigns. That's one way to get engaged. I can copy that link for you here. Probably I could type it in. Obviously, it's highlighted down there at the bottom. So that's one way that people can get involved. And we're trying to get people involved within their parishes so that there can be some learning opportunities so that people understand what complex problems are. And then invite people into taking action on behalf of their brothers and sisters. And that includes advocacy work. So I want to pause and just confess something to you all. This idea of millions of people is inspiring to me. And I do know that we do have millions of people who support CRS, which is really exciting in the work. But thank you so much, Mary Beth. Look at you go. She typed the link into chat, so I didn't have to do that as we were going. So my background is actually social work. And when I first started out of school, I worked in a locked unit for troubled teens. And we would get, assaulted on occasion or bit or have to break up fights. And I'd have to go into the office and fill out an incident report. And there was a little plaque on the report on the desk for us all. It's a shared desk, of course. We didn't have our own spaces. And a little plaque with a quote by Margaret Mead. And you may know the quote. It says, never assume that a small group of people can't change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And I would be filling out an incident report after getting bit or something. And I would look at that quote and I would get so mad at Margaret. And I'm like, Margaret, I'm not changing the world. We've got a small group of people here and they're biting me. And it's not changing the world. And I would get frustrated with that because small groups of people change the world. Okay, it's a nice idea. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And so I went on to work in other avenues, including community organizing, where I had these great grand visions of people marching on the mayor's office and demanding change and flooding the streets and politicians responding to us. And that's when I really got frustrated with Margaret, because I realized she was right. She was right. It's never, you never get a march of 1,000 people without a small group of people getting behind that. We don't get hundreds of thousands of people advocating in the United States without small teams of people in the United States and parishes and communities talking about it and educating people. And it is those small groups that make a difference. And so I do get really excited, and I have to confess to Margaret every time I read her quote now, I'm like, yes, you're right, I get it. Small groups of people coming together can and do have phenomenal impact on the world. Can I get a volunteer to read this quote? Am I sharing my screen right now? I am not. All right. Am I now sharing the screen? Okay. Could I get somebody to read this quote from Pope Francis? It's from Evangelii Gaudium. My Latin pronunciation is horrible, so I apologize. But would one of you mind reading that for us?
Sure, this is Marie.
Thanks.
An authentic faith always involves a deep desire to change the world, to transmit values, to leave this earth somehow better than we found. The earth is our common home, and all of us are brothers and sisters. If indeed the just ordering of society and of the state is a central responsibility of politics, the church cannot and must not remain on the sidelines in the fight for justice.
Thanks so much, Marie. I love this quote for two reasons. One, it encapsulates a lot of church thought, because here, Pope Francis, everyone's like, oh, he's a more progressive pope. Of course, he would say something like this. But that whole second part, he's quoting Pope Benedict from a previous letter that was written. And so it's this sense that that long-term work that the church is doing. If this common home is us, and that we are all brothers and sisters, if we believe this stuff Jesus says, right, that I am my brother's keeper, and if the just ordering of society and state is a central responsibility of politics, then we can't remain on the sidelines. Now, I want to be real clear here. I've got a friend who is an Episcopal priest, and he was doing a talk, interfaith talk with some Jewish rabbis, a Catholic priest from Mount St. Mary's Seminary, and a couple other folks. And he had this quote that was really important to me, that as the church gets involved in politics, we can't get partisan. And he used a pretty colorful language to say it, which stuck with me, which is the church can't get in bed with a political party because it's she who won't be respected the next day. So as CRS engages in this work, we are deeply, deeply nonpartisan. That, in other words, we want all Republicans and all Democrats to agree with the church's position. We're not going to take a Republican position. We're not going to take a Democratic position. We're going to take the church's position. And in our work, we can't remain on the sidelines. And the Bishops' Conference affirms that as they talk about faithful citizenship, of the moral obligation of Catholics to be involved in politics. But I want to be clear, we're not talking about the partisan politics that has so rankled the American political scene for today. So as we do that, the question is, how do we do that? One way that we can go deeper is that we've started doing, in addition to our campaigns, forming CRS chapters around the country. CRS chapters are communities of faith and action that are composed of local volunteers. And in our chapters around the country, some of them are based in parishes, some of them are based in schools and universities. Some of them are diocesan chapters that encompass a number of different parishes, people from a number of different parishes. But they come together to both pray, to build community, and then they organize both advocacy and giving opportunities within their communities to advance a more just world. CRS says this, when I started with CRS, one of our taglines is solidarity will change the world. And I have to admit, I'm a sucker for that. I do believe that we can come together and change the world. So we're excited that we've started this new initiative. And part of the reason is when CRS first started our work overseas, we'd have a staff person in a village. We would be working within a small community. Today, we're working to eliminate malaria in West Africa. We're working to strengthen the health system across Africa, right? So our vision of intervention has gotten bigger. And in order to do that, we want to get bigger too. So 5 years ago, we were working in thousands of Catholic parishes across the country through volunteers, and everyone was doing great things. But we had this idea of what would happen if all those parishes started doing the same thing at the same time. If we started rowing in the same direction. And so instead of rowing in circles, we're moving forward. And so about a year and a half ago, we started our CRS chapter initiative. It was actually in the spring of 2019. And today we already have more than 90 chapters and clubs in 22 states across the country. I am personally working right now with the Diocese of Richmond so we can color in Virginia. I definitely want to do that. And while we have some strong advocates here in Maryland, we don't have a chapter yet. And so I'm looking to do that too, for a couple reasons. One, both Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen are really important for us. They are both sitting on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So we got to get smart if we're going to do this advocacy work. And we can do it in community and through prayer and learning and action. That's the heart of CRS chapters, working together to be catalysts of change for the common good. And they're actually helping us propel forward some real transformational change. So, right, we're in the middle of a global pandemic where there are a lot of issues going on, but our advocacy work and building relationships with members of Congress over the past year has actually helped millions of children around the world reach their God-given potential to thrive. It works. Our work works. And so I do want to share this really, really exciting success story with you. When there were more than something like 250 million children worldwide, was estimated not to be reaching their human potential due to the negative effects of poverty or malnutrition, violence, or war. CRS chapters got Congress to prioritize a solution, and that solution was the Global Child Thrive Act. One of the things that we learned is that early intervention in those first 1,000 days of a child's life, in the first 5 years, really matters, and really critical brain formation occurs. This beautiful little girl that we're seeing here, in order for her to reach her God-given potential, the neural pathways in her head need to connect. And how do we do that? Well, here in the United States, when people get kids and grandkids, we give them all sorts of gifts, right? Little colorful building blocks and music and songs, play, all those things. When I had my kids, I had no idea that was critical to their early development, but it is. And we've seen situations around the world where that isn't just, it's not known, it's not a fact. And there are parents out there who don't play with their kids, who don't necessarily sing to them, who don't try to stimulate them by giving them these interventions. And so through the Global Child Thrive Act, we got Congress to prioritize this. It was a bill, it was a way to urge our nation to improve the lives of vulnerable children by requiring all the government's international humanitarian programs focused on children to include early childhood development activities. So in other words, if we're doing a feeding program somewhere, we want to make sure that the interventions are happening so that people are educated about why early childhood development matters and what can be done. So why is this part of the solution? Well, rooted in our program experience and research, we knew that early childhood development activities have been proven to help young children feel secure, develop, and grow. So it's critical for children who are refugees or who are hungry or malnourished and face adversity. With others, CRS, we got the Global Child Thrive Act introduced into Congress last spring. We got a Republican and a Democrat. So a Republican up from Pennsylvania and a Democrat down from Texas to come together to introduce this act in the House. And then we found a Democratic Senator, Chris Coons out of Delaware, and Roy Blunt out of Missouri, two pretty polar opposite guys, to come together to introduce the Global Child Thrive Act in the Senate. And through our chapter members, over a year of advocating, we were able to secure close to 100 bipartisan members of Congress to co-sponsor the bill in the House and the Senate. We sent letters and emails, we wrote op-eds in local papers, and we had meetings, honestly, over Zoom, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we didn't let that stop us, to educate Congress and urge them to act. And those letters made a difference. After their victory, and so that actually became law. It passed in the House and it passed in the Senate. I'm a little blown away because on average, it takes 7 years to get a bill passed through Congress. Okay, 7 years. And in 1.5 congressional cycles, in one cycle of the House of Representatives, right, because they're up for election every 2 years, we're able to get a bill introduced and passed, both members of Congress, and become law. And it was really exciting because we had members from both the Democrat from Texas and the Republican from Pennsylvania on the House floor credit CRS chapters. They said this would not have happened without CRS volunteers around the country calling members of Congress. They called my office, they met with me, they got me to co-sponsor this bill. And because of that, kids around the world are going to succeed. So as you can imagine, we just had that passed in January, so we're going to take the rest of the year off. No, I'm kidding. We're not. We're facing more problems than ever. And with the global, after that victory, we immediately turned our sights to a specific legislation that can address critical issues highlighted by our two campaigns, again, migration and hunger, that need the collective voices of CRS chapters and our national network. We've got a COVID-19 supplemental funding is our current legislative focus. And this is going to help us ensure vulnerable families, especially those who are displaced and already experiencing hunger and poverty, so that they can stay safe and healthy. As you can imagine, have any of you had some challenges with social distancing? Right? Being able to stay home, quarantine. Imagine trying to social distance in the midst of a refugee camp, right? Where people are hungry, where there's giant feeding programs. CRS is committed to trying to maintain safety for people, educating people. In this picture that you see on the screen, this is one of our feeding programs in Guatemala, and you can see distance between the different participants. At our programs, we actually lay out hula hoops on the ground where people can stand for their point in line, where they are able to come up in order to get it, because we want to make sure that people are safe. But in order to do that, we've got to be able to do it. COVID-19 virus, it's obviously, as you know, the largest pandemic since 1918. We've lost more than 2 million sisters and brothers globally, and more than 100 million affected. Here in the United States, we're already over 500,000 people who have succumbed to the disease. And so while the US Congress is addressing immediate needs for our local communities, we can't turn away from global suffering. The World Bank estimates that COVID-19 is going to really increase extreme poverty and cause it to rise actually for the first time in 20 years, with something like 110 to 150 million new people falling into extreme poverty. Over the last decade, we've made tremendous strides in reducing the number of the extreme hunger, but it's on the rise again. And so we expect that 270 million people worldwide are going to require food assistance this year, and that's almost double what it was last year. Our faith compels us to protect the world's most vulnerable, such as refugees, families experiencing hunger, from the pandemic's impacts. So we're asking people here in the United States to help us advocate for the US Congress to secure at least $20 billion for international response to COVID-19. Now, you might be thinking, hey, Chris, 20 billion, that's a lot of money. And you're right, it's more than the pocket change I normally walk around with. I will confess to you there. But truthfully, it's a very small percentage for what the US government is actually spending right now. When we're talking about $1 trillion bill, I'm going to pause for a second and do a little exercise that maybe this can sink in. We can't think of $1 trillion. It's like impossible for us. It's such a big number. But we can think of seconds, right? You guys know how long a second is? If I stacked up 60 seconds, we get into about a minute worth of time. But if I stacked up 1,000,000 seconds, we're talking about 11.5 days. So 1,000,000 is 11.5 days. If I put 1,000,000,000 seconds together, it's a little over 30, it's between 31 and 32 years. Going from 1,000,000 to 1,000,000,000 is going from around 11.5 minutes to 31 to 32 years. When we start talking about 1 trillion seconds back to back, that's more than 32,000 years, longer than human civilization. It's longer than we've been doing agriculture on the planet. So when we're talking about 20 billion versus 1 trillion, it's a very small percentage. And frankly, if we're trying to do this, it matters. So every month, CRS chapters around the country gather together for a national call. Our next national call is Saturday, March 13th at 1 p.m. And breaking news, we just confirmed that Senator Chris Van Hollen is going to be our guest speaker on the national call. So what I'm as interested in trying to start a chapter here, maybe if your parishes are thinking about, hey, we want to do more advocacy work, we'd like to get involved in advocating on this issue, we would love to have you. And so if you're interested in joining with us in creating this thing and just kind of want to get a sense of what chapters are doing, I would love to invite you to the national call so you can hear Chris Van Hollen talk about the COVID supplemental and what the US government is willing to do. If you would like to do that, what I would ask you to do is drop your email address in the chat and you will get in, I will make sure you get an invitation to the call. It is Saturday the 13th. It will go from 1 to 2 o'clock. Typically these calls are reserved for our national chapters, but we're inviting people in who are thinking like, maybe my parish would want to do this. Maybe I've got some friends who might want to be involved in advocacy on this level and take this step. And so if you'd like to do that, feel free to put your email, your name and email in the chat, and I will make sure that you get an invitation. But I do want to pause there and say, I've talked a lot. CRS is trying to do a lot to save the world. We're asking people in the United States to be involved in that. What kind of questions come up for you? What's the sense of it? Is like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. That's crazy. Or holy cow, Chris, we do that all the time. Give us 4 more things that we can do because we're already doing that one. Where are people at right now? And Mary, by the way, I love your cat. Great, Pauline. I'll make sure that you get an invitation to that.
Thank you. See, I'm just wondering, may I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because, you know, we don't get alerts from CRS regarding issues that we can, you know, advocate for with our, you know, legislators.
So part of that is joining our campaigns. That's one way to get the alerts so that people are plugged in. And you can do that on our website. Let me, actually, I'm just gonna click on this right here, pull it up and share it with y'all.
I see you.
So this is the link that Mary Beth posted in chat, the crs.org/get-involved/lead the way. If you just went to crs.org, you would get to it under the Get Involved. And here, And by the way, all of our stuff is bilingual. So if you have Spanish speaking members of your parish who are interested in being involved, all of our stuff is involved there. And this talks about our campaigns. And by signing up here, this is where you would get action alerts and other invitations into the work that we're doing. And so that's one way that people can get involved with that. And that's people can plug in. And then obviously you can take action now to uphold human dignity, leading the way on action and hunger. See here, we have an action calendar where we invite parishes and communities around the country to take action together. And there are more ways to get involved. One of the neat things that I think we're really working on now is trying to think about formation of Catholics from a young age all the way through adulthood, right? And so by working with kids in elementary school around CRS Rice Bowl and teaching them around that. In our high schools, we start introducing advocacy, and we have high school students who are joining CRS clubs. And when they go on to schools, universities, we have something like 90 Catholic universities across the country that have CRS chapters where students come together to learn and advocate. And then in parishes now, as those students are graduating, there are CRS chapters. And so it's a way that people can plug into the work of CRS along the way. I'm personally excited because my daughter is a senior. She is going to graduate, knock on wood, and God willing. We probably won't have a ceremony, but she will graduate and next fall go to the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. Don't ask me why she picked a really cold place to go, but they've got a CRS chapter there. So I'm really excited. She's actually come to trainings with me in the past and been able to see some of the work that we do. And so she'll be going to a school with a chapter. So we like to invite people in on that. Other questions that may have come up.
I'll just mention something that was helpful for me. I told you I have friends who work for CRS. And a couple of years ago, during one of the big disasters in the world, I forget which one, I was talking to my friend about donating. And I just mainly donated to the Red Cross. And she said, oh no, CRS. And so, I mean, that made a big difference. So anytime there's a choice, CRS gets my money. And we do.
Well, thank you, Mary. Both of those are great ways to be involved. The donations to CRS, especially in times of emergency. So one of the great things is because we have a pool of money from Catholic communities around the country, we're able to respond very quickly in an emergency. So if you remember the Boxing Day tsunami in Indonesia, about a decade ago now, maybe a little longer, we were able to look at the funds that we had and commit something like $10 million that first day to emergency relief. And we already had staff on the ground who were responding because they were there. And being able to put money up front, we're able to leverage more money from the US government. So the US government often gives grants to say, look, you put 10% in and we'll give the other 90%. Having that money that comes from donors like you in those emergencies through CRS Rice Bowl allows us to leverage extra money from the US government in many of those cases. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, and we would love to be known that domestically, and when there's an emergency, we hope that people are donating to Catholic Charities. That Catholic Charities is how the church responds here locally when there are emergencies, and around the world, our Catholic community can fund those disaster relief efforts through CRS.
I'd like to share.
Go ahead, Pauline.
I'd like to share, because we do, most parishes have a peace and social justice ministries. And so, one of the things we, think that we say is think global, act local. And so like even in my parish, when there was a tsunami in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And the pastor, actually, the staff actually asked me, Pauline, what can we do? And I said, money, and so the parish in one weekend was able to raise 5 figures. And, it went through the CRS specifically for the Philippines. And then it so happened that the following year, I was in the Philippines and
Oh, were
we were
you?
in a traffic. And right next to me, to our car, was the CRS van. I said, "Oh, look, they're on the ground," So
Yeah, there was a really bad typhoon that hit the Philippines. I mean, that happens a lot. In fact,
yes,
one hit while I lived there. I still remember the big trees being knocked over. But the Philippines are particularly prone to typhoons given where they are in the
right,
Pacific Ocean. But one of the neat things that we saw was in Tacloban was the rebuilding of the
yes,
homes survived the cyclone the next year. So not only building, but building back stronger and able to do that. Amy, did I see that you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I had a quick question and you sort of just answered it. Is it possible like for a parish to donate to a specific country or a specific place? Our parish has been struggling with the best way to support Haiti and, have our money make a difference in improving things, not just, you know, either knowing that it's used prudently and that it's making a change versus just keeping the status quo.
Yeah, so the one thing I would say is that CRS continually rates at the very top of the charity watchdog list as far as the amount of money going. I think it's 94% of every dollar is going directly to overseas programming. And so it's a pretty high rate. And that's actually at the crs.org webpage at the very bottom. You'll see all the ratings for the year. And it fluctuates year to year depending on what happens that particular year. But it's typically between 94 and 96% of every dollar goes directly overseas. So that's one. Two, people can donate directly to country programs or specific projects through some of our catalogs, like our Arc of Hope. If you want to give to water projects and things like that, you can do that. But we always need money in the general fund. And I know that we as Americans want to make sure that my money is going for a specific thing. But like the example I gave you before, our ability to bring that doctor to the remote village in Ethiopia mattered because we had flexible funding. And so our general fund allows us to make sure that we're meeting the most immediate needs on the ground for those things. But we can donate to particular country programs as well. And we have a very robust and long-term program in Haiti. And Mary Beth, you've actually been there with our program. Haven't you been to Haiti?
No, I actually have never been to
Never
Haiti.
mind.
I've been to several other places with CRS, but not Haiti.
Never mind, I was able to do that. Well, ladies, I do want to note that I recognize that our time is over. I would love to stay in contact. I will put my email in the chat. If there are follow-up questions or anything, I am more than happy to get with you and to answer any questions you have, or to if your social justice group wants to do some sort of a workshop or something, I'm happy to have a conversation with you on that. And I just want to say on behalf of the 135 million folks around the world that we serve every year, thank you so much for your time and your interest in this work.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, God bless. And I will make sure that for those of you who put the note in the chat, that you will get a personal invitation to the March 13th call.
And that's so exciting. I hope you guys, whoever's able to join, it should be really great. So it's pretty special. Thank you all too. Just a second, Chris. Thank you all for being here today. And it's great to see some familiar faces and see some new faces as well. So
Bye-bye.
you all have a
Bye.
great rest
Thanks,
of your day.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.